if you are an adrenaline junkie, you can always trust Ducati to give you a fix of speed and performance. And when it comes to the Multistrada, you can always trust Ducati again to push the limits of speed and performance in the adventure sports segment. In fact, there is now a new Multistrada. This one, the new V4.
It's every bit a Multistrada, no matter what angle you look at it from. There's the sharp beak, the biggest headlamps you will ever see on an adventure bike, a big tank, and body panels that almost make it look like a full-fed machine. And finally, that pointy tail that shows off its sports bike inspiration. The red color shouts that it is a Ducati and that it is going to be fast.
Those headlights work extremely well. In fact, I don't think that you would really want to spend any money on auxiliary lighting, but then to each his own. They also come with a cornering function, and I think it works quite well even in our conditions. As for the bodywork, it is inspired by a sports bike. You can see all the cuts and creases and all the wings here and there, and it does cut through wind at high speed just the way a sports bike does. But because you sit in a more upright position, you do feel a lot of wind blast beyond the 120-130 km/h mark.
One glance at the speedometer will tell you that you have strayed way over the legal speeds. The cuts and creases in the bodywork tell you that it was developed in the same wind tunnel as its racing siblings. And these wings help in cutting efficiently through the air at high speeds and also aid in cooling.
But the Multistrada still heats up quite a bit. Especially in warm and hot conditions like these, you will see that temperature gauge shooting beyond 108 degrees Celsius within a matter of minutes. And as before, all the heat is felt right here, under your butt.
That is despite the V4 discreetly turning off its rear cylinders at idling speeds to reduce heating. Get going and the 4 cylinders fire up again with the typical twin pulse firing order of a Ducati V4. Building speed rapidly with a sweet soundtrack, one that will instantly make you forget all that heat.
The Gran Turismo V4 engine, it's simply impressive. Of course, it takes its inspiration from the Panigale in terms of its layout, but the internals are all different. But the intent, in a way, is same. Don't get yourself a Multistrada if you want to enjoy that laid-back riding. Of course, there are different riding modes that will dull down the power to give you that kind of riding experience, but that's not the intent of this bike. You will be literally doing the Multistrada an insult if you were to ride it in any other manner than hard. In fact, that's the whole beauty of this engine. That's the whole beauty of this motorcycle. It loves to be ridden hard.
The Gran Turismo V4 is more compact than its sibling in the Panigale V4. And though it's down on torque and displacement over the Multistrada 1260, it makes up with more power and extra cylinders, and it feels more manic. It also does without the desmodromic valve train and goes with conventional valve springs instead.
The advantage is lesser valve clearance checks and in turn significantly longer service intervals, which on a touring machine of this kind makes a big deal. What isn't that great for a touring machine of this kind, however, is the kind of fuel economy that this bike has.
Like most BS6 or Euro 5 engines, the new V4 is thirstier, more so with the extra cylinders. Gentle highway cruising at 120 km/h returns a fairly decent fuel economy. But if you ride the Multistrada like you would a Ducati, you would be lucky to get a 200 km range out of its now larger 22-litre tank. While the fuel economy is below par, the tractability of the engine isn't. It's so flexible that you can be in one gear all day long and still enjoy the city, highway and the twisties like the bike was tailor-made for it.
The power comes nice and strong beyond the 4000 RPM mark. In fact, if you want to just cruise around on this motorcycle, you can easily do that between 4 to 5000 RPM. You don't have to really rev higher. But beyond that, you really get a good dose of speed, performance. You have that nice rush of that acceleration. There's a brilliant electronic suite on offer as well, something inspired again from the Panigale. So, in fact, if you were to try and turn off the traction control, turn down all those electronic aids, you will realize how powerful this engine is, because the bike just starts sliding around everywhere. You have that raw performance from the engine, and it's something that a lot of you, especially who are upgrading from sports bikes, are absolutely going to love. Now with these kind of electronics and this kind of performance, even for those who want to take the Multistrada to the racetrack, there are quite a few Multistrada owners in fact who do that. The engine is going to complement that intent quite well as well. The only fly in the ointment is going to be that wheel, a 19-inch front, because Ducati isn't doing a Multistrada Enduro anymore, and that's the reason why they've tried to achieve this balance with that 19-inch wheel. Now the bad news is, for those of you who want to take this motorcycle to the track, you'll probably not get as many options with sticky rubber for that 19-inch front. But the good news is that if you were to take it to terrain like this, you can simply slap on more off-road friendly rubber and you should be able to have a good time. If you want to go into slightly more wilder terrain, you can also opt for wire spoke wheels. That should increase the scope of this motorcycle even further. And because of this wheel combination, because they're not doing that enduro anymore, the sexy single-sided swing arm is gone.
By default, the Multistrada comes with the Pirelli Scorpion trail tires, which will do the mild trails quite well and are quite impressive on tarmac as well.
Sure, those 19 inches don't feel as sharp on the turn-ins as the 17s, but they do have a lot of front-end feel, and that imparts a lot of confidence as well.
If anything, there are more advantages to the setup because it improves the scope of the bike further and can let you cross over between road and off-road without having to worry too much.
These wheels and tires are complemented further by the electronic suspension, and I think it is one of the best setups in the business.
It walks about nicely on poor road conditions, and high-speed stability is superb. Show it some corners and the motorcycle smiles wide and will make you grin as well. Sure, an onboard lap timer is a bit much, but it's seriously good around the winding roads thanks to the lower center of gravity achieved by the V4. It has similar advantages off the road as well, as the bike doesn't feel as top heavy as the 1260 or the 950. The Multistrada V4 is still more tarmac biased though, and on the highway it truly shines. To that effect, it also has a new radar guidance system.
This little box hides a radar system that enables the adaptive cruise control system. This is one of the first motorcycles to get it, and it's already available in India. It works very similarly to what we've seen on some of the higher end cars or the ADAS systems that we've seen on some of the newer cars like the Mahindra XUV 700 for example. It will detect scooters, motorcycles, bicycles, cars, trucks, everything, and then depending on the cruise control speed that you've set, it will alter that speed to match the speed of the vehicle in front of it. It can also maintain a safe distance depending on the parameter that you've set on the console. Now on a motorcycle, of course, the dynamics are a little different, and that's the reason why this system will need a little bit of getting used to. But once you do, you realize that this actually works quite well even in our conditions.
There is a radar at the rear as well, which will warn you of vehicles in your blind spot using an amber light on each rearview mirror. And it's bright enough to attract your attention even in broad daylight.
This radar understands the difference between vehicles that you've already overtaken and vehicles that are actually closing in on you and are in your blind spot.
This system works as advertised and is a big boon for bikers. I think it needs to be a standard fit for all motorcycles.
Now to go nitpicking. That adaptive cruise control system, I think it works quite well. However, there are a few scenarios where it just starts becoming a little iffy. For example, if there is a lot of crowd on the highway, if there are too many vehicles on the highway, if all the lanes are occupied, it will latch on to the slowest vehicle and then adapt the speed according to that. And that can sometimes be tricky because you may not be in that lane to begin with. Next up, if you go into a dip or if you're approaching a crest, the vehicles that are in the dip, it will not detect those, and then when you approach the dip or when you get over the crest, it will suddenly detect that vehicle and then suddenly rapidly bring down that speed, and that can again get a bit unnerving at times. So these are scenarios where it's a bit iffy. Next, the screen. Now you do get a satellite navigation system. Okay, not a satellite navigation system, but an app-based navigation system. You get the Cigic app, but for that you need the Ducati Connect to be running. But for the Ducati Connect to be running, you need that app open on your phone all the time. The screen has to be on all the time. Now there are problems with that. For example, you cannot store away the phone in this particular space that's given here if you have a big phone. For example, I have the 12 Pro Max. It just doesn't fit in here with its cover. And even if it does, or even if you have a smaller phone that can actually fit in there, there is no ventilation here. So the phone eventually overheats and then just shuts off. that means your navigation is gone. You could keep the phone in your pocket, but again the screen has to be running, so if there are any notifications that accidentally get pressed, or if some part of the screen accidentally gets pressed and maybe the app shuts down or minimizes, again your navigation's gone. So you have to wait, pull out that phone, again make sure that the connection is active, the interface is active, and then get the navigation running. You can also mount the phone on a cradle. I think that is the best way to do it. You can have a mounting cradle somewhere and you can put that phone there and then have your apps running. That I think is the ideal solution. But if you are doing that, might as well use Google Maps, because Cijic still doesn't know India that well. And the last bit I want to nitpick on is the quick shifter. It works well on its own, no problem with that. However, I think the intent sensor for the quick shifter is a bit too eager. For example, if you were to slow down for traffic in city conditions or on the highway, or if the adaptive cruise control were to rapidly slow you down, and even if your left foot tilts by a small margin, it thinks that you want to downshift, but there's no enough pressure to downshift. So what happens is essentially it goes into a bit of a confusion, and then it starts giving you constant jerks as if you were not operating the clutch right. And that can get unnerving at speed. That can also get irritating every now and then, especially if you're riding in city conditions.
Find your way around these quirks and the rest of the motorcycle is simply impressive. It has superb braking manners, excellent highway manners, and even with a pillion and luggage, there's no dearth of power. The seat cushioning is firm and may feel too stiff at first, but a few hours into the saddle and you will appreciate the long distance comfort that it offers.
Now moving on to the bits that I actually like about the motorcycle. Most of them actually are off-road focused. For example, if you look at the 3 radiators, they're angled in such a way that they're always out of harm's way. The bike is already so dirty, but they have hardly picked up any grit, any dirt, and that's something that I like. Again, while riding off-road, there's a very nifty feature that they've added. If you look at the screen, the angle of the screen can change. This is for road, this is for off-road, so when you're standing up and riding, the screen tilts up a little bit, so it's easy for you to read. Similarly, when you're standing up and riding, you also see that the angle of the mirrors has been designed in such a way that they don't mess with your arms when you're standing and riding. I think this is also a very intelligently done feature. Like all of this, the rest of it, the entire design, it's all functional. From the cuts and the creases and the wings to everything that you see on the motorcycle, it's all a functional design. It's a nicely, tightly put together design, and the fit and finish is typically Ducati. It feels premium every bit that you look at it.
With Ducati now deciding not to do the off-roader enduro version, the new V4 features a conventional but really long swing arm that will take the optional wire spoke wheels and knobby tires. There is an enduro mode for the tricky terrain, and the 19-inch front gives it a decent off-road capability. Arguably, this is what the Multistrada always should have been, an adventure tourer more than a sport tourer. The bigger engine packs more power but is lighter and compact, giving the bike better ground clearance. It is also a smoother powertrain and contributes to making this bike a more refined motorcycle than its predecessors. Sure, the ergonomics are still sporty and tarmac oriented than its rivals, but that's always been the essence of the Multistrada. And sure, it comes across as quite a pricey proposition as well, but spend some time with the V4 S and you will realize that for the amount of tech it packs, it actually offers tremendous value over any of its rivals. Do let us know, what do you think of the Multistrada as a package? We think it's extremely value for money, it's fast, and it's typical Ducati. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and please do share this exclusive video with your friends and family who love motorcycles.